Let's continue our journey with the 6 lines of IQ. For those of you that are just hopping on, we're going through all the 6 lines in the Gene Keys profile. We've finished up the Pearl sequence, we finished the activation sequence, and now we're working our way through the Venus sequence. And your sphere of IQ is your mental model of the world. And I want you to see how your mode of thinking is a frame that can be shifted. And when it is shifted, it has a huge effect in your life because it allows you to see the world in a new way. It allows you to see the world in the way that you were meant to see it, as opposed to through the eyes of the cultural conditioning of your parents, of your friends, of your religious community, whatever it may be. That's oftentimes where the disconnect comes from. We have a way that we're designed to see, but we've taken on the beliefs of another. And therefore, you're not getting what you actually want because you're seeing things, you're thinking about things through the frame of somebody else, and it's keeping you from getting those things in your life that you've really wanted all along. And your IQ is a mental pattern that you fell into during the years of 14 to 21. So we talk about these 3 phases of incarnation: 0 to 7, 7 to 14, 14 to 21, which tie to your SQ, your EQ, and your IQ respectively. And this is a pattern that showed up when you were emotionally overwhelmed. It was your brain coming on and reorienting or producing thoughts so that you could protect yourself. You had all of these super strong hormones as you were going through puberty, and you are starting to plug into the world in a more social and connected way. And it, at the time, required you to see and think about the world in a way that didn't just destroy your heart. However, we've got to come to a place as we grow and as we mature that we see the conditioning that it is, because that conditioning solidified our separateness from the world, from other people, and set up this defense mechanism that just blurs the lines of reality of what's actually happening. And it's helpful, I think, as we think about reshaping our IQ, to think about your thoughts as something that you're picking up on. There's like a field. Instead of them being produced by your brain, it's something that we're not quite sure where it comes from. And this could be the truth, or I could be way off base, but intuitively, this feels true for me. For example, if I tell you, think of a movie right now, something pops into your head. For me, it was the movie Jaws. Why? I don't know. I did mention that movie yesterday. Maybe that's why it came up. But of all the other movies in the world, why that one? It's not like I consciously went to some place in my brain and thought of that answer and brought it out. And by thinking of the world that way, we have this model that gives us a small degree of separateness, lets us observe our thinking a little bit more. And that is what we need. Because each line has a different psychological bias, right? Different ways of thinking that underpin our behavior in the world. And to shift that frame, you've got to be able to catch it in action, which means you need a degree of separation because you need to be able to see that process happening. You need to be the conscious observer. And when that happens, you have to pay extra close attention. What is the pattern that I am slipping into right now? And that can be really hard to do because, well, your emotions are high. And that's the hardest time to actually notice what's happening. All right, let's get into our first line here, which is the contemplative mind. And what we have here is the pattern, and then the shadow pattern is in parentheses. So contemplative at the gift and city frequency, or what we call the hidden mind at the shadow frequency. And genius, all genius, arises from contemplation. And that is why it is a cornerstone of the Gene Keys. If you're unaware, Richard Rudd, the founder of the Gene Keys, has a book solely on contemplation. This is not a wisdom that you can pop into and pop out of. It's something that takes time. It really needs to work its way into you. So if you are coming to my content, watching your one line and getting the hell out of here, you know, I love you all and I'm glad that you're here, but that is not the intent with these videos. You've got to take it all in, let it go where it needs to go. And first lines live a contemplative life naturally. It's just part of who they are. They need time to sit with things, to soak things in. So I used to own a business, and part of my role in that business was sales. And you get really good at reading people and interacting with people, which is just a natural one of my talents anyway. But I encountered this type of person while selling that was really foreign to me, because that's not at all how I operate. But I would say something and they would just sit there quietly. And I had to learn, as the person selling, to let that person just sit, because they were this first line. They need time to process. If I continue to talk, they're gonna get distracted. They're gonna get pulled out. They're gonna feel knocked off course. And so if you're a first line, I know you can identify with that person that would just sit there. You need time and you need space. You also have this internal focus as a first line. So these are people that we see as deep, that like can go and just sit in a room and be quiet and think about things for hours on end. They'll just sit there and noodle on philosophy or on a specific thing that happened to them in their lives. And that is great, because that is where insight, inventiveness, that's where all of those things come from. We need that time. However, as a person on the outside, you may never see that genius of the first line. You may never recognize what that person is doing, because they are not showy at all. First lines are not there to get other people to notice them. They're there to go inside and to have the insights themselves. So as a first line, you're going to thrive in aloneness, but you also need interaction, because it's that interaction, and that doesn't need to be with people, although it could be, but interaction with the world is what gives you your next piece to contemplate. So it's this balance of, I need to go back and let an insight percolate through me, and then I need to go out into the world, and you need to work on sharing that insight. That's a big piece of what we'll talk about later. But also you need to engage so that you can have the next thing to sit with. And you don't need to go anywhere to have that aloneness as a first line. You can be sitting in a full and busy coffee shop. It's about fostering that internally within you. You can learn to be alone when you are at a train station. It takes time and it takes practice, but you can do it. Now at the shadow, you turn inward and withdraw when you're dealing with pain or with intense emotion. That's the shadow. That's the hidden mind. You want to hide yourself away. You want to lock yourself in a room, and that is your safety. That's where you feel good. You know, my mom, this was her pattern when I was growing up. Something would come up and she would go and just lock herself away in her room, sometimes for days. And as a kid, that was really hard, because I felt like it was probably my fault. Looking, and that's the value in understanding all of these lines. I'm a 6th line here, but understanding that about the first line helps me to have more compassion for her. Now, it's called the hidden mind because nobody knows what's going on in there. Nobody can break through because you're so withdrawn. And so you have to learn how to express what you're thinking in a way that feels safe for you. And that's going to be different for everybody. And you might need to experiment with what that way is. But your job is to come back out with that insight that you gained through contemplation. And it doesn't need to be spoken. There's lots of ways that you can share that insight with the world. You can make something through art. You can create a business and take action that way. Even your silence. when done in the right way at the right times to the right person, can convey a lot of information. What you need to be careful of is not keeping it all to yourself. You've got to focus on self-expression and on releasing that to the world. Moving on now to the second line, we've got the brilliant mind, and at the shadow frequency, the provocative mind. So the first line genius that's found in contemplation is refracted here, and it shines out like light through a prism. So you take that insight and it just, in true genius fashion, goes out to the world. And this is the closest line to what we would see in pop culture as genius. So like an Einstein or a Tesla likely were these second line IQs. They are the great explorers and searchers of the mental plane, and it leads to quantum leaps as they come back to make new connections for the world, right? This is Newton sitting under the apple tree, getting hit in the head and figuring out gravity. That's a very second line act, and they're able to combine the left brain logic with the right brain vision. And in plugging those things together, they bring these insights that totally can shift paradigms and are completely inventive, right? This is Einstein's theory of relativity. He took everything we thought we knew about physics and shifted it on its head. And it's not just thinking that happens in this second line, right? It's not just the contemplation, but these twos have an expressive and creative quality to them. So they're able to take these thoughts and bring them out into the world in a way that like really shines out and really lights people up. These are people that are designed for the limelight. They're designed to say, look at me, look what I have found, and to bring it out into the world. At the shadow, though, it makes this mind provocative because it's unable to hold back in certain ways when it needs to. It gets so full of itself at times, and it doesn't understand how other people don't think that it is just the best thing going. And so there's this anger and resentment that starts to show up. As teens, that anger and resentment shows as rebellion. And it's like this it's the obnoxious teenager who just wants to do the exact opposite of everything that you're saying just for the sake of doing the exact opposite. You are going to, as a second line, strike out and rebel, whether that is against another person or it's against yourself. And this is common in all teenagers, but second lines take it to a whole other level. Also, they are often misunderstood and unjustly punished. They're so brilliant, they're so smart that other people oftentimes are disconnected from them. I used to have a coach who worked for me who was an absolute genius. I mean, just totally brilliant. He had a hard time expressing it because he couldn't connect with people on a deep level because he thought so differently from everyone else, right? This is the classic, genius who potentially is on the spectrum and has a really hard time relating because they're so bright. And so they get punished. They get seen as separate because of that. And then in later life, this person is primed to explode, primed to go into these fits of rage because of this separateness, because of this anger that lives underneath. And remember, I mentioned that anger earlier. You have to learn to manage that as a second line. And a lot of times, second line, one of the keynotes is denial. So you might have this second line and you might be saying, I am not an angry person. I have second lines as a main part of my profile. So I understand. And for a long time, I denied that I had any anger inside of me. And then fairly recently, within the past months, I was sitting out at the beach meditating and I had this aha moment. I don't get angry, quote unquote, but I would get annoyed with people. And what I recognized in that moment is that annoyance is anger. just by a different name. Maybe I'm minimizing it in my mind, but if I don't like what somebody is doing, I'm angry at how they are acting. And that was like a huge light bulb for me. Like, man, I have these little bits of anger that are hidden everywhere. So you have to understand for you where that anger is coming from. And you have to learn that you're in reaction and learn that it is coming from oftentimes you feeling like you're misunderstood. And it runs really deep, that feeling. And so you might not even know that it's there, and you might project it onto another person, and you make them the ones that get cast out, that feel misunderstood. But you are the one responsible for your feelings. You're the one that needs to turn inwards and use that anger to fuel your brilliance. You turn it back in on itself and you use that frequency, you raise it up inside of your body, and you offer it as service, as a gift out into the world. All right, moving on to line 3, we've got the flexible mind or the evasive mind at the shadow frequency. And this is a pattern that is founded on flexibility. Remember, 3s are our taste testers. They're doing lots of different things, experiencing lots of different things. They love travel, they love to move, they love uncertainty. And so this is an adaptive mind. It's someone who thinks on their feet. So I was in the Marine Corps, and one of the sayings that we used to have is adapt and overcome. And that's what came to my mind when I thought about this third line brain. This person would be a great first responder. They'd be great in intense situations, maybe be great at sales or negotiations, because they can take in this new information and in a heartbeat decide what is the best course of action. It's very exploratory, especially early on, but really in reality throughout its whole life. It's going to explore lots of different belief systems, lots of different ways of thinking and seeing the world, lots of different mental structures. And that's a gift, because it allows them to communicate with other people in a way that they understand, because at some point they thought the same way as that other person. So they see where they're coming from, and that makes other people feel seen and feel understood. These third lines are strategic thinkers. Because they're able to see it from other people's point of view, they're able to have this overarching strategy in their mind and then explain to each individual person how they need to hear it, why we're working towards that strategy, and how we're going to do it. So they're really able to like connect all of the nuts and bolts. These people would make like great managers of people, because they can get everyone working towards the same mission and the same vision. At the shadow frequency, however, this is the evasive mind. There's never a straight answer. They're unwilling to commit to anything, right? The blessing is they're bouncing from thing to thing and they can understand lots of different things. The curse is, and again, I say curse, but every shadow contains a gift. It's really just a blessing in disguise. But the thing that you need to be aware of is that you can run from one way of thinking to another way of thinking before it's time to naturally move, because you get uncomfortable and you don't want to sit in it. You just avoid issues and you deflect from one person to another. You also get easily bored and move on to the next thing. So like, remember, this pattern's developed in 14 to 21. School may have been like a big catalyst of this, or a big way that shows up. Like you just are bouncing from one thing that you like to learn about to another. You never get deep in anything. You can't pay attention in class because it's not interesting to you. You know that it's going to affect your life. Doesn't matter. You're bouncing over to this other thing over here. However, it always bounces back. That mind always goes where it needs to go with proper boundaries and understanding. That's really the big piece. You need some banks on the river to help your direction as you choose what is coming next. You can easily be caught in distraction because you have a hard time stepping away from the drama. What I mean by that is we're all living these mythic lives. We're all a part of this great story. And it's helpful to remember we're on a giant rock floating through space, rotating, our whole galaxy spinning around, literally the universe itself expanding, but threes really can't see any of that. All they can see is the person that's standing right in front of them across the way. And they're so involved with that drama that they feel like every day could have like a drastic impact on the rest of their life, and they need to be in this thing. And the key for threes is to give yourself some space, to remember that the thoughts that are going through your mind are not necessarily your thoughts. They're things that are popping up. They're things that you're picking up on. Remember the frame shift idea that we talked about earlier. Moving on now to line 4. This is the influential mind, and at the shadow frequency, it's the inflexible mind. So these people are born to be influential in the world. And they're influential in a way that is to people that are already in their lives. So this isn't like a line 5 influence where 5s have this impersonal influence, like they're leaders of movements. 4s are leaders of communities. They're leaders of friends. They're leaders of people that they interact and engage with. And unlike the meandering 3, 4s pick something and are laser focused on that thing for the entirety of their life, really. They focus and they dedicate themselves to something. And that makes them an expert. Most influential people, that's what they do, right? They get into a field and they devote their lives to a single goal within that field. And that's how they become influential, because they become experts that other people turn to. 4s are also great communicators. And so their ideas are able to spread, right? This is the line of sales. This is the line of community. This is the line of love. And so they're able to interact with other people in a way that leaves impact on those other people, which if you're an expert trying to get across an idea is obviously very helpful. However, at the shadow frequency, we can see how potential strengths can become a weakness. So if you are laser focused on one thing, that makes it really hard to see somebody else's point of view. You can't see things another way. You become inflexible. And you're unable to accommodate what other people are thinking and what other people are feeling. You just are entrenched in your worldview and your beliefs, and you could really care less about how somebody else sees the world because you're the expert. You know without a doubt this is the way. But as I talk about often, there is nothing but paradox in the universe. That is the only thing that is true. So there is always another way. It's hard to see outside of this 4th line frame. This one's a tough one to break. And when you get further along in life, at the shadow frequency, the 4th line is going to tend to be isolated, which is a shame because it needs and thrives in community. But you're going to push away anyone that doesn't fit into that paradigm, into that way, your way of seeing the world. So what you need to do, because you have this laser focus, right? And you're not willing to see other people's views of the world, is you've got to get out of your mind. It's really hard to see a pattern of your mind from within your mind. It's like a juxtaposition that's really hard to solve. So we've got to get into our physicality. We've got to get into our body. We've got to just be patient, be open, and think on a deeper level, right? We talk about the intuitiveness of our belly. We talk about putting our awareness in other places of our body. If you're a meditator, that is a really good idea for a fourth line who is trying to get this frame shift to happen. All right, moving on now to the fifth line, which is the practical mind, or at the shadow frequency, the defensive mind. So these are minds that are here to act as a catalyst for change and transformation in the world. This person is a problem solver, right? In fact, that's one of the keynotes. Problem solver, fixer, leader are all fifth line keynotes at various spheres throughout the hologenetic profile. And what fives can do is locate the needle in a haystack like immediately. They are able to sort through things, to throw out the nonsense and to identify what actually matters and then share that with everyone. They can organize, right? They might go through hundreds of hours of information, pull out 1 hour of information to be able to share that with the world, and it changes the way that everybody sees everything, because that is the piece that was important. I'm a part of this thing called Synthesizer School. And it's all about this idea of, like, I love consuming new stuff, and I go down deep rabbit holes, and I do it with books and podcasts and YouTube videos, all sorts of different ways. It's like my whole life. And up until recently, I've really just kept that for my own self-development. But what I'm realizing is there's a ton of value in like writing down the takeaways and sharing that stuff with the world. So Synthesizer School is all about that idea. It is because they're able to sort through information like that and share it in a practical way, other people lean on them as leaders. They see them as special because they just share insight after insight. However, at the shadow frequency, you get bogged down in ultimately what is self-pity. And I say self-pity, but in reality, what it is that a feeling that everyone is against you. And this shows up in the teenage years. I had this like big time. You feel like you're alone against the world because everyone puts you on a pedestal, because everyone looks to you for guidance. There's like this separation that ends up happening. So in my previous business, I was like a leader of a bunch of people, both on the staff side and for people that engaged with my business. And I had to talk to people all the time, give speeches all the time, be on video for people all the time. And I had this just intense feeling of separation. The fact that I couldn't connect with everyone, that everyone was against me, that I had to do all of this on my own. Why can't anybody else understand? It's like this self-pity loop that starts to happen. And that pattern persists for this fifth line brain all the way through its life. It's like, I am all alone and nobody cares about me. And because of that, you are constantly going to be on defense. You're going to have this defensive mind. You're going to feel like you can't trust other people. You're going to feel like you need to create space between you and others. And that just reinforces the same pattern. And to get out of that, it requires a jolt. You have to start to allow people in. You have to see that you're the one that's creating this separateness. The people that they're looking to you to lead would rather nothing more than to be closer to you. It's you who's putting this dividing line. You not being vulnerable and not allowing the people that you're leading to actually see who you are. That was a big part of it for me, is I felt like I needed to show up in this particular way. And if I didn't, I was letting myself down or letting them down. And that created a barrier because it was like an act, essentially. It was a mask. And so then how could I possibly have a real relationship and let somebody in when I'm doing that? I was constantly on the defense. And that's a hard thing to break also. So you need to be aware of a jolt. Be aware for that aha moment if you have this fifth line mind, and then lean into it when it happens, because that is the way out. That's the way to change the model. And then finally, we have the sixth line, which is the objective mind or the absent mind at the shadow frequency. And this is the only line that can show up truly objectively in its thinking. Each other line has some agenda, and it could be a positive, helpful agenda, or it could be a negative, fear-based, I need to control more agenda, but there is always an agenda. Fourth lines are trying to change the way people are seeing the world to their way of seeing. Fifth lines are trying to offer people a solution and get them to engage with it and use with it. Second lines are trying to bring a new paradigm, a new way of seeing the world. Sixth lines don't do that. They're really just there to surf the mental plane, to take in all of these ideas just because. And it is a long process, and you're going to take in many different viewpoints. Remember, I've said before that the sixth line often feels like a third line earlier on in its life. You need all of these different viewpoints because you need to see both sides of the coin. And eventually, all of those different viewpoints are going to be transcended, and you're going to end up ultimately at your own viewpoint. And that is the silent mind. That is seeing the actual story for what it is, which is what this sixth line mind is designed to do. It's designed to see the illusory nature of the world that we are living in. And it takes many, many, many lives into a single life. That is a classic sixth line journey, is we need various viewpoints to understand that there is a new or a different transcendent viewpoint. And that's why sixes are the vision holders. There's a new way of seeing the world. And when sixes align to nature, it allows the living, wild wisdom to come through. It allows the information that nature is trying to convey to come through them, almost like they're a channel. I hesitate to use that word because it can be associated with some out there stuff that I think is people putting their own spin, their own brand on what is coming through. But six lines aren't doing that. They are simply aligning themselves to the current and sharing with the world what comes from that current. And you don't need to tell the world where it came from. That was my big mistake, or continues, I think, to be one of my mistakes, is that I needed everyone to know about the divinity that is within. I needed everyone to know that they have this connection to this other thing. I think ultimately, though, what truly matters there is sharing the idea that came through, not necessarily where it came from. When people are ready for that, they'll find it. And I still go back and forth on that, as I'm sure you can hear as I'm talking. At the shadow frequency, there's a separation so deep that feels like a person's mind isn't even there. And that's where we get the absent mind. Because they have this objectivity, they can like totally suck themselves out of the world. And it can come across as just deadness, like this zombie feeling to other people. The eyes of this person lose their shine, and it's like they're disincarnate. Certainly they're disrespectful and disinterested, especially in the teenage years. That is how this shows up. It's like this disinterest, this malaise, this you just are a total nihilist and don't care about things. The sixth line keynote at the core wound is indifference. So it's a very indifferent feeling. Later in life, that manifests as being totally numb to the world and to emotions. And because of that numbness, sixth lines often feel like they have something wrong with them. They just don't understand. And this is my line. And I identify with that. Like when I read that for the first time, I was like, oh my God, thank God somebody said that for me. For example, when I had my daughter, I had no emotion. It hurts my heart to this day. I didn't cry. I wasn't happy. I wasn't sad. It was just like a thing that happened. Bringing a life into this world, one of the most important, impactful things that can happen to anyone. And I, in that moment, panicked because I thought I was broken. I thought I had done too much to myself. I'd done a lot of drugs. I was in the military. I had a lot of trauma going up, and I thought that I was doomed forever. But there's nothing wrong with you as a sixth line when you're in that place. It will come back when you learn how to self-parent, when you learn how to nurture yourself. And to heal, you just have to be patient. And you're gonna need a patient partner for this one too, who understands that sometimes you're just gonna go away. And that's part of the process for a sixth line. What you need to work on is saying, hey, this is one of those times, so that everyone's on the same page. And I'll be back when I feel like I can be back. Your heart is going to go cold from time to time as a sixth line, as due to just this like memory that you're carrying in your cells. And honestly, it runs much deeper than what is happening in your life. All you have to do is to just be with the pattern, just wait, and eventually a shift is going to come. So those are the 6 lines of IQ. My name's Jay Cohen. You'll see that if those of you that have been around, I changed the name of the channel. It's not Waking Up Grateful anymore. I think that was giving off too many vibes of like, this is about gratitude and positive affirmation, and that's not what I'm after. So for simplicity's sake, because I don't know what I'm gonna end up doing, both personally and with this channel, I figured I would just make it my name. So thank you for being here with me. Those of you that have been on this 6 lines journey, I'm getting lots of positive feedback. Hopefully this one's great. Also, we're going to be hitting the sphere of the EQ next. So this is your intellectual model of the world. Next, we go to our emotional model of the world and how we use emotions to either disconnect or connect with what's happening around us. All right, guys, until next time.